Hi, I'm Tim Kilduff, and this is Business Matters. Business Matters is HCAM's show focusing not only on businesses in Hopkinton, but more importantly, the people who run and manage those businesses. Today I have with me Steve Carbonell, the president and co-owner of the Richmond Group in Hopkinton. Steve, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
My pleasure, Tim. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You know, I think in order to, I've been through your resume and their career shifts and directions. I think that's, and we want to talk about that. Sure. I mean, that's really what we want to drive it. We want to try to find out what gets you up in the morning and out the door to go to work. But I think we ought to start with a little bit of an overview of the Richmond Group. The building, by the way, in which HCAM is headquartered, was built and is still managed by that particular group. But you know what? This, and it's been here a while, this building is standing the test of time, isn't it?
Thank you, yes. You know, we were sort of forced into it. We were down at 87 Elm Street, and the Egan's purchased the building, and they wanted it for their family business. And so we had to find a new home, and this property was available. It's the site of the former Pine property. And so Pine was willing to sell it, and then Ed Beckett and Pete Markarian were really the first two to develop the site. And when Pete retired, I took over his share of ownership back in 2006.
And you know, you mentioned the names of the founders of the company.
My predecessors.
Yeah, can you give us an update on how they're doing? Because they both had an impact on this community.
Sure. So Pete Markarian has lived here, I don't know, I've been here for 25 years, so I have to believe Pete, he's now moved out, but he was probably here for about the same 25, 28 years. And Pete was, for those who know him, was very active in the town on the planning board and on high school building committee and many other committees. And he's always believed in giving back. And so they had this opportunity to build this building and did that, and then Pete retired from the Richmond Group and Thompson Realty, the entity that owns the building, at the end of 2006, beginning of 2007. But he wasn't done. He had his eyes set on developing the parcel at the corner of 495 and Main Street, where Price Chopper and some of the other offices and retail spaces are. So he continues to have an interest in the town and continues to own and develop property here in town.
And that project is, I think, is now 100% maxed out, isn't it?
I think so. I think they've got it pretty well filled up, maybe a small piece of office space on the second floor, but I think it's been very successful for them.
How about our friend Ed?
Ed Beckett, too, is co-founder of the Richmond Group and also developed this parcel. Ed is doing well. He's still an owner in the company and in the building, and he is off doing some other development interests right now. And so he, although is still an owner, is at sort of an arm's length and has left me and a couple other partners here to keep the building in good shape and keep the business up and running.
Now, how about the group itself? Because I know you have a particular area of focus in your work, but little overview on the Richmond Group.
Sure. The Richmond Group, Pete and Ed are the ones who started it in 1991. And we both sort of met for the same reason that they started the business. We were dabbling in the construction and design industry in the late 80s, basically focusing on the emerging biotech industry. And back in the early 80s, late 70s, I think people envisioned that Massachusetts would be a hotbed for electronics and semiconductor. Never really happened here. There was a small presence, but what was happening was something no one really knew what it was. It was really the origins of the biotech industry that today is a big part of the Massachusetts economy. In fact, today, arguably, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Boston area in general, is one of the most sought after research locations in the world. And there isn't a major pharmaceutical or biotech company that doesn't have a presence right now in Massachusetts, and it continues to grow. So it certainly has helped bring the state through some tough times. And so Pete and Ed saw this happening and decided that it would be interesting to start a company that would focus entirely on that industry that requires a certain technical skill and experience in dealing with these technically advanced facilities.
So you match up with these guys, but how did you get to that point? Because one of the things I think people sometimes forget or overlook is that it takes education background and some success in that particular area What's that track? What's that track been like for you?
For me, I grew up in Worcester. In the early days, was always interested in taking things apart and putting them back together. And I gravitated toward carpentry and wood, and worked for some construction companies. And being a Worcester guy, certainly renovated my share of 3 families. And so I've always had an interest in construction. Went to Holy Name High School, where I had an opportunity to take some architectural drafting classes, and although my interest was really construction, advisors back then thought, well, you should focus on architecture and become an architect. And so I was sort of guided toward that field, went to Wentworth Institute and received a Bachelor of Science in Architecture in 1982, and practiced architecture up through 1988, when I really decided that my true love was not only the design portion and engineering and technical aspect, but actually building it and putting the bricks and mortars together. And so it was about 1988 where I shifted back into the construction industry. And my first project for a construction company was to actually build Genzyme's first research lab in 1 Kendall Square in Cambridge.
Wow.
And so that was my introduction to the biotech field. And as we did that project at the company I was with, we had other opportunities in the biotech industry. And so today at Richmond, we do both planning and construction. And so we employ architects, engineers, and builders. And my background enables me to uniquely be able to help navigate the Richmond Group through both the design and construction process. And so wasn't a waste of the first 8 years of my career. It was something that I'm thrilled that I was able to do from that side of the table, and now certainly still work with architects and engineers very closely. And that experience helps me understand what their challenges are and help guide them toward our design build projects that we predominantly do.
So building in the biotech and the science areas has to be very different than building an office building per se.
It very much is. In both, it's a much more expensive endeavor, and there are a lot more sophisticated technical features that are part of every life science and research building.
As a manager now, I get the connection in the background, but what are the other pressure points in what you do you get involved in on a day-to-day business? The management side, because you could be the best architect in the world, but if you have employees, you've got to deal with that.
I think the same is true for any business. The biggest challenge and goal is to bring all of this. There's many pieces, many people that have to become part of a team to have a project be successful. And so I see my biggest responsibility as being able to both bring these people together, be focused on the same goal, pay attention to what really needs to be paid attention to, and not get digressed into things that might be supplemental, and then continually motivate people. Often our clients hand us or negotiate a project with us, and there's already a budget and there's already a schedule. And so they look to us to deliver that project within that time frame and for that amount of money. And that's what I think our company has really become known for in the industry, as well as being specialists. One of the only companies in the state that specializes just in this niche.
Really? Sitting right here in Hopkinton.
Right. And so our approach and position is that if you hire Richmond to do a life science project or a technically advanced facility, you'll get project managers, superintendents, planners, designers that have just spent their career with the company working on similar projects. And so we're able to bring the experience that we gain from each and every project to the next project. And as opposed to having a super that just spent the last 2 years on a residential project or a commercial project, they're able to come to these job sites and these projects and understand the intricate details and how to make it work, and they've seen it before. And so we're able to say, if you hire us, we're going to put a team on your project that has done this time and time again. It's what they do every day. And they have the resources within the company of people who are experienced in the codes, the mechanical systems, the electrical piping systems. It's a complex industry. It's very different than office buildings and industrial buildings or institutional buildings.
You used the word us. What's the number that goes that's associated with us? in the company?
Richmond, we are 65 people today.
Really?
We do, this past year, we had one of our largest years. We put a little over $150 million worth of work in place in 2015. And all of it was life science projects. Every once in a while, we have a client or an architect who's worked with us, likes the way we work, and will ask us to do something outside of the realm, but we don't market that. We actively 100% are focused on the life science industry. And we may have a client who calls and just wants us to do office space or a lecture hall, which is pretty common, not technically advanced, but if they're a life science company, we will do anything they want and happy to do it and maintain relationships.
Where are the clients? All over the United States, within a 50-mile radius of Hopkins?
We're fortunate, Tim. We don't have to go very far. Basically, I think a lot of people don't realize it, but Cambridge, Massachusetts, Boston vicinity is arguably one of the most sought-after research locations in the world. They're primarily any major pharmaceutical company or biotech company is seeking out a location here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So fortunately for us, and in the early days forming the company and building a company plan, we realized that we could have a company our size, a mid-sized company, have a great quality of life, not have to get on a plane and travel every day to our job sites across the country. And so we've consciously stayed focused here, and with this being one of the major clusters in the world, there's plenty of work to go around for us.
It's interesting because you hear we have a new governor, new administration. Everybody talks about the importance of this particular industry, but I would think it's got to be competitive. So do you get involved? North Carolina comes to mind, Research Triangle, that sort of thing. In your work, do you have to engage with elected officials in terms of promoting the region?
We do. We work closely with, MassBio is a quasi-government private company. Bob Coughlin, who is the CEO, Pete Hebert, who's the economic development person there. We work very closely with them when they're courting businesses coming in from other parts of the country. And the difference between the Carolinas, the triangle in here, is the triangle is predominantly manufacturing. And although we have manufacturing here, like Bristol-Myers Squibb is probably one of the largest manufacturers here in the state, in the Devons area, people seek out Massachusetts not for manufacturing but for research. And it's the academic, hospital, and existing biotech companies that create an ecosystem that is the envy of the country. And with the exception of maybe San Francisco, the Bay Area, who would like to argue maybe they're number one, I think quite clearly if you look at what's happened over the last 5 years here in Massachusetts, I think undisputably Massachusetts is the most sought after research location. Manufacturing is a little different. At the end of the day, even though it's pharmaceutical manufacturing, the majority of the workers are blue collar workers. And so it's hard to compete with other parts of the country where the cost of living is low, labor is
right.
cheap. But there are still, in the biotech industry, manufacturing small molecules requires much less space, much more specialized type of employee. And so we see more and more small manufacturing facilities here in Massachusetts, close to the research and close to the talent.
How much time do you have to spend on analyzing the market and the industry and trends?
In terms of time, I think we can see usually a year in advance. I mean, none of us could foresee the economic downturn that occurred in 2009, and it even affected the biotech industry, although we continued to work through that collapse in 2009, and it was the interesting part, it was the larger biotech and pharmaceutical companies that still had the money. And the beauty for us of these facilities is that even after they've been built, they require constant maintenance, they require constant change, updating with new systems. And so we're able to look at certain pieces that we know. Often within building a facility, we're ripping it down before the paint's dry and repositioning it, and so we can always rely on that. The larger projects, they're a little bit harder to predict, but right now there's unprecedented building going on in Cambridge in particular. Also Boston, but Cambridge has 1 million square feet under construction that is mostly spoken for in the biotech, from biotech users. So
Steve, the growth that you're talking about, does it have an impact on MetroWest, or at least minimally a potential impact? Or do you see it out here?
Absolutely, absolutely. We've seen it happen most closely to Cambridge, Lexington, Waltham, Bedford, Watertown, all have small biotech clusters. It's very convenient to Cambridge, where the epicenter is. But we do see a correlation between UMass, who has pretty much taken over the entire biotech park in Worcester, and all the way up to Devon's now that Bristol Myers has settled out there. And a lot of times it has to do with where the CEO lives.
Right.
And what the technology is. But Marlborough has become a little mini cluster in itself. Quest Diagnostics just opened, I think, a 200,000 or 300,000 square foot facility in Marlborough, and GE Healthcare is underway with a very large project. So Marlborough's been very friendly. We see a cluster there, and Hopkinton has a small cluster that's been here since the 80s. Some of the earlier companies were down on South Street, and so Hopkinton and some of the people in Hopkinton have worked hard to get bio-ready designation from MassBio, and so we have a little cluster here on South Street as well.
Now, you and your family live in Hopkinton.
We do. I moved from Boston to Hopkinton in 1988, and even though I've tried to move a few times, my family wouldn't let me, and we certainly wanted to stay in town, but we've raised 2 children. My wife Michelle and daughter Amanda and son Lucas have grown up here in town, went through the Hopkinton school systems, and my daughter now has graduated and is working in the city at a startup that's exciting for her. My son is still in college, but we thoroughly enjoyed. It was a great place to raise a family. Our business is here in town, so that's convenient, and it's a great location. We're sort of in the middle of the Worcester and Cambridge life science companies.
Yeah, probably ideally located. We talk a lot about that, those of us that are interested in economic development in the community, and the issue of location keeps up. And I think, I'd be interested in your reaction to this. I think in general the community hasn't quite accepted the power of that. Do you have that same sense?
Yeah, I think it's hard. It's interesting when a community figures out what this type of business brings to them. There's a couple of things. It brings expensive facilities that translate into higher taxes. It brings an educated workforce. And I think one of the more important things is it's low density. And so as compared to a typical office building that you might estimate 1 person per 100 square feet, we would typically estimate 1 person per 350 square feet. And so all these things together, once communities figure out, like Lexington has, like Waltham has, like Watertown has, and many other communities are starting to try and really bring these tenants into their area through different incentives, whether it be tax incentive plans or just being welcoming and helping with the permitting process. And not like 20 years ago or 25 years ago when people were afraid of it. They didn't know what it meant.
Right.
They were worried that there could be some sort of hazards that they didn't understand. And I think we're quickly overcoming those and realizing this is a great industry to have in our community.
Yeah. What's let's jump back to your day-to-day schedule. What is it? What are the things that that get you excited about your work? That that continues to help keep you focused and moving forward.
Right. After 25 years of doing this, I'd say that I mostly enjoy meeting with, and this happens quite frequently, 2 scientists who, for the first time, are going to spin their technology out of MIT or out of one of the universities, and we sit with them and understand, and they don't even know exactly what they need. They've been working in MIT's facilities. They haven't had to think about building or arranging any of this stuff. And so for me, it's exciting to sit for the first time with a new client and begin to put together a vision for them or help them realize their vision and start with a blank piece of paper. And so we try and understand what is their technology, what type of research are they doing, and then what we can bring to them is a great understanding of what type of facility that they need to match up with what they're trying to do. We're sensitive to costs. We know as a startup, they don't want to spend all their money on facilities. They don't have that kind of money. And so I think that for me, it's exciting to be able to sit with a brand new company that hasn't even, it doesn't even have an address yet, and help them find a location, help them design and build a facility, right up to, working with some of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. But for me, I still get a kick out of working, and we tend to focus on the more entrepreneurial companies. And it's a lot more exciting. There's a lot of passion involved. And that helps get me through the day, quite honestly.
What's the most challenging part?
Well, the challenge is always there's a budget, there's a schedule. You have to help guide them through what they want, what they need, and what they can afford, and what can be done in the time frame. And so it's getting the entire team, both internally within our company and our consultants. There are many consultants, architects, engineers, code consultants that are involved. Getting everybody focused on that same goal, that's the challenge. But that too is still very interesting for me, and you feel good at the end of a project when you've achieved your goals, you've brought it in on time, on budget, the client's happy. And our goal is to do 5 more projects with that same client. And obviously repeat business for any business is important, but we thrive on it.
So there's the planning, the project planning, but you're also thinking there's got to be a strategic plan for the company, thinking ahead out. Could be 5 years, 10 years?
Our plan is simple. Our plan mostly is to focus on a certain type of client in terms of size. We love to engage, and in this area there are so many entrepreneurial companies, and so
right.
Although we do work for companies like Genzyme and Astra and Bristol Myers Squibb, that's sort of an ongoing piece of our work. We strive to stay close to the new companies and the mid-sized and emerging companies, and there are venture capital firms here in Boston that are looking at this year, and I know Third Rock Ventures is planning on launching 5 new companies. And so, our goal would be to help build those 5 new companies that haven't even been developed or named yet. And but overall, long term, we're not aspiring to grow to be a billion-dollar company. We like being in a company that we can still manage within the partnership, and we can focus on every client and control the quality and have a good quality of life and not have to fly around the country. And I think we realize is if we want to grow and be a billion-dollar company, you have to be willing to travel. You have to be willing to take that outside the state lines. And at least right now, as we do long-range planning, we're content with how we're running the company. We're profitable. And again, the quality of life is important to us. We're able to treat our employees very well with both compensation and benefits and good working conditions. We try and have fun. I think if you're not having fun at what you do, it's time to find something else to do.
I continue to be struck by some of these themes, and you've struck on it a couple of times, this quality of life issue. Now adding the concept of having fun. Is there a challenge recruiting people to Hopkinton?
Fortunately, based on the size of our company, Genzyme has a very large research and design group here in Framingham. They have a manufacturing facility here in Framingham, and so we're not far from the center of it all. And what I have noticed, if you look at our employees, as a construction company, about 30 of the 65 people actually work out of this office. 35 of our employees hardly ever come to the office. Their office is on the job site scattered across the state. So it's a little easier for us to find people, and frankly, here in the Northeast, to have someone who lives in southern New Hampshire or in Springfield or in Cambridge or Boston, it doesn't seem to be an issue for them. And we try to put the supers closer to where they live, but it's compared to the West Coast or other parts of the country, it's not a big geographical area.
So the location issue relative to Hopkins is a real asset, isn't it?
For our size company, yes. And a lot of our employees that work in the office, we have 2 or 3 other Hopkinton employees within the company. And at the beginning there were even more until Pete and Ed moved out. The 3 owners lived here in town. And as I said with the CEOs earlier, it's not unusual for the business to be close to where the principals live. But recruiting has not been a problem for us.
You've also spent some time doing work in the community yourself.
I have. Over the years, as our kids were growing up, like most of you out there, we spend a lot of time at sporting events and so forth. And certainly as a young professional, you have to put in the hours to get ahead and be successful. But it's good to give back both here in the building. We help out with companies like HCAM, and also have been involved with other building projects. I sat on the Hopkinton Police Building Committee, which quite frankly, back during the Tom Irvin days, it was a lot of fun, and I got to meet a lot of people in town.
You know, and if I might add a little commercial point, the planning that went into that, the size that was built, the sensitivity towards expansion was really first rate. That building's going to be there, and it's going to be used as the community continues to grow. So that was a good piece of work.
I agree, and it's interesting doing a public project where there are certain guidelines. There's always a check and balance for money and spending it, in a smart way. And I think that the committee that we had at that point in time did a great job balancing all those things. And we made concessions like anyone has to make, but I think we made smart decisions. There are times when somebody might say, well, let's do vinyl siding or clapboard on this building, and my position was, I think the building has to be designed to last 150 years, and you can't do that with clapboard. So it's masonry. We have fairly sophisticated mechanical systems in the building. We have good backup systems. I think it's well designed, and we traded off in other areas to keep the budget down. And I know that we finished that project, under the budget. There was a little money left over to do some extra things that they on the nice to-do list. And yeah, I'm pretty proud of how that turned out, and the rest of the team should be as well. I think it went very well, and it continues to serve the community.
That was a job well done. One of the frustrating parts of these discussions is they're always too short. I think it's fair to say, at least from my perspective, I've known of the Richmond Group, and I've known of the work that the company does, but it's pretty apparent that one, you're thoughtful, two, you're knowledgeable, and three, you continue and build a company in a very strategic way, but that is all employee sensitive. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us a little bit. And I think Hopkinton should be proud of Steve, and should be proud to have the Richmond Group headquartered here in Hopkinton.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.